just talking about feminism, I know this is a little bit of a political topic, and it doesn't feel like it plays any relevance in healing and self-development, but I think there are theories out there that are not really empowering, and they don't empower you to make good decisions or make decisions that feed your higher self or feed your highest potential. I think there are theories that are all about the material world and material success, and the human being is not just a physical being, it is also a spiritual being. And it's not enough to just talk about materialistic success, and especially as women, I think one of the theories that are really disempowering for women is feminism. Feminism makes you unhappy with being a woman, and it really invalidates the biological nature of a woman. It is a very competitive theory where it competes with what they deem to be superior. And so it fails to even empower women, because essentially the model believes that women are inferior and men are superior. And so the more women behave like men, the more empowered they will be. And so the only way to be empowered in feminism is by becoming like a man, is like becoming a man or behaving like a man. And so that means that there is no real place in the world as a woman, because a woman is inferior, a woman is weak, a woman it doesn't give women any real power in and of themselves, or it doesn't really give women any intrinsic value. There is no value to being a woman. The only value you have as a woman is what you can do, similar to a man. And this is why it fails to empower women. It appears on the surface that it empowers women, but it really is creating miserable, traumatized, resentful women who are unhappy with who they are, who are unhappy with the natural difference that makes a man and woman different. This is not to say that we need to accept inequality and oppression. We shouldn't be saying, okay, we should just accept inequality and accept oppression. We shouldn't be accepting oppression, but women in their nature have value, and feminism has created this idea that men are better than women and men are more superior and they have a lot of privilege and power, and we want to have privilege and power. So the only way in this world we can have privilege and power is by becoming and acting like the people who have privilege and power. Whilst they understand that those people who have the men that they resent, who have privilege and power, also commit oppression and injustice. And so what we've not asked ourselves is, how can we empower ourselves as women, but how can we prevent oppression and injustice on anyone who's weaker than us or anyone who's inferior to us? And that is something that feminism has completely missed. Once you act like a man, that means once you start behaving like a man has less empathy than women. A man is more self-centered and self-interested than women. There are all of these qualities that you will also develop. The more you act like a man, the more the negative qualities that men have, the more you will possess the negative qualities of men. Men and women have both good and bad qualities. Men and women both have extremes. Men and women are both capable and have been capable of causing harm to others. It isn't just men. Obviously, men are responsible for majority of the violence and majority of the systematic oppression that occurs. But we can't just erase women from the effect they've had on their communities, on their families. Like when you look into history, when there has been systematic oppression, that system was created, although you could say the men were leaders of the system, it requires both men and women to participate in the system. And so women have participated in the system of oppression. Women might have also encouraged that system of oppression. And in most cases, women accepted that system of oppression. So not only were they participants, they were contributors to oppression. And I think we've kind of missed that part where we just blame men for everything, and we blame men for all the oppression and injustice that has occurred in history. And women have been responsible for oppression and injustice that happens in the home. When you hear of women, when you hear of the evil stepmother, Cinderella and Snow White, when you look into fairy tales or fictional stories, there were places where women did encourage oppression, or they did encourage violence. If you look at Lady Macbeth, in the story of Macbeth, it is Lady Macbeth that encouraged or created the monster that became Macbeth. It was her greed and her desire for more, her desire for her husband to be more powerful, that led to destruction. And I think that story is not uncommon, and it's not just rare where women haven't been part of any oppression. You will hear of the mother-in-law who's oppressing the daughter-in-law, or the daughter-in-law who tries to break relationships and who tries to create problems in family dynamics. Women have been causing harm and have been the cause of suffering for maybe many other from other women and for other people around them. And to say that women are completely free of any blame and they've always been innocent, I don't believe that narrative, that women have always been this weak, feeble, vulnerable, exploited creature in society, and that they've contributed nothing to the oppression and to the violence and to the injustices that have occurred in the world. I don't believe that narrative to be true. When you look at the time of slavery, are we saying that women weren't active participants in that oppression? They didn't take any benefit from slavery? Yes, it might be that the men went and purchased the slave, but it was the women who utilized the slaves. It was the women who might have encouraged violence from their husband towards the slave if the slave didn't do what they wanted them to do. So what I want to say is that, first of all, something that I want to correct is this idea that women have always been the oppressed group and women have never been part of oppression. I don't believe that to be true. The second thing is that there are very distinctive biological differences in men and women that affect our nature. So men lack the control over their sexual urges and sexual desires, and women lack the control of their emotional urges and their emotional impulses. And these two differences lead to problems when they're not managed well, when they're not regulated. And so feminism removes that natural difference that occurs between men and women. Men and women are looked at as biologically same, psychologically same. Like there's no difference between them. But the reality is, even in this day and age, even in the 21st century, where women have proved that they can do just as much physical labor as men, there are still differences in how we treat men and women. Even when we want to implement this equality, there is still inequality. You don't treat the man the same as a woman. You don't treat men and women the same. If a grown man is crying and a grown woman is crying, you have two different responses to that. You don't feel, even in this modern age where we want to claim that men and women are the same, we still treat them differently. And I think feminism is a very important topic to cover, because feminism for me is disempowering. Feminism tells me that being a woman is inferior and I should be more like the man. It tells me that women are weak as they are in their nature. And that is true. Women are weaker than men. But that's not to say that women don't have their unique strengths and they don't have equally powerful resources to counter their physical weakness. The example I want to give is children. You can't get anyone who's more weaker and more vulnerable than children. But when we look at the dynamics between adults and children, even though children are extremely weak, adults don't just automatically hurt them. Most adults are very protective over children. So even though they are weak, they also come with a resource. They can resource from others protection. So they might not be able to protect themselves, but others have the need to protect them. And this is the same with women. Women are weaker than men, but there are social dynamics in play where women can resource protection from others. Women are more emotional, and that's why we make more room and more space for their emotions. We make more space for their mood swings and their unstable emotions. So it isn't completely negative. It isn't a complete disadvantage to be a woman. There are disadvantages, but there are disadvantages to being men as well. Although they have more power and privilege and generally they are more superior in the world, but women have their unique strengths. They have their unique place in the world, which is not on par or in comparison with another man. Because once we start making comparisons with other groups and with men, then we have to lose our womanhood. And so feminism encourages the loss of womanhood and the transition towards masculinity, and to me that isn't empowering. And so when we look at feminists, they're not really the example for us morally, they're not the example for us spiritually, they're not the example for us as liberators or as teachers. When you look at them, feminists are examples for us to become successful in our careers. Feminism is the example we take when we want to be successful in our careers, not the example we take when we want to be successful in our relationships with men, in our relationships with our family members, in our relationships with our children. They're not the example. And so we need to set a new example for women, which doesn't erase their womanhood from them.